Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro reiterated condemnation of the unilateral and coercive measures imposed by the US government on the Venezuelan population. There appears to be no end in sight to the political crisis in Guyana as the Elections Commission began recounting some of the ballots this Friday. Colombia, Costa Rica and Peru have confirmed their first coronavirus cases. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. In a meeting with government officials, governors, mayors and other high government officials, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro issued instructions to fine-tune and accelerate the process to file complaints against the unilateral and coercive measures imposed by the US government on the Venezuelan population.
Sanctions mean violence. Sanctions are supremacist and racist disregards against the people of Venezuela. And that includes both those who enforce and those who call for these sanctions, condemned and rejected by the overwhelming majority, if not all, of the people of Venezuela.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro also denounced the collusion of the Colombian government in Washington's plots against the Venezuelan people.
The White House has devised a war plan for Venezuela. That is why Trump called his treacherous puppet Guaido to Washington. He then sent him back with the order to destabilize our country. Let's be on the alert. Let's just be on the alert. That is why Trump also summoned his other puppet, the Supreme President of Colombia. And the only issue on their agenda was Venezuela. No, they did not speak about drug trafficking or how Colombian cocaine exports to the United States are skyrocketing. So Trump asked the subordinate president, Ivan Duque, how's your plan to deliver Venezuela going? And I'm not exaggerating. I have first-hand information. Trump grabbed him by the neck and told him, you told me you would deliver on Venezuela. And Duque rushed back to fulfill Trump's orders and dispatched mercenaries, war, terrorism and bombs to Venezuela.
And early on Friday, Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, launched a national campaign entitled Sanctions Are a Crime, which will denounce the damages caused by the economic sanctions against the Venezuelan people. During a press conference, Rodriguez highlighted that Venezuela has presented dozens of reports to the International Criminal Court, noting that unilateral US sanctions violate international law and should be considered crimes against humanity.
On February 13, Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza went to the International Criminal Court in The Hague to once again present our case to prosecutors. Venezuela is living through a very particular situation when it comes to international law. For the first time, there is a case being presented where we have shown that unilateral, coercive measures that today make up a fundamental part of the foreign policy of the United States are crimes against humanity. We presented an extensive report where we documented all the actions carried out by the U.S. and the confessions made by their officials about how these sanctions directly hurt our citizens.
Colombian authorities are investigating the murder of former guerrilla Astrid Conde Gutierrez on Thursday in Bogotá. Since the Colombian peace accords were signed in 2016, 191 former guerrilla members have been killed in the South American country. The FARC party denounced the latest assassination on social media. The Legal Solidarity Corporation, an NGO that defends human rights, noted in a statement that Conde was in the process of reincorporation into society and studying in the Colombian capital. The FARC party also denounced the government's campaign of obstacles and stigmatization in regards to former guerrillas. Chileans are preparing to mobilize this Sunday to mark International Women's Day. The slogan, "Never again without us women," has become common during the widespread protests across the country, as activists stress that the call for gender equality and women's rights is as important as the demands for social and economic reforms. Alondra Carrillo, spokesperson for one of the country's largest feminist advocacy groups, known as 8M, explained that as well as sharing the demands of the wider protest movement, Chile's women are voicing specific gender-related issues, including the demands for legal abortion, an end to domestic violence, and greater equality in the workplace. And news of the murder of Domingo Ramos Saló, leader of the Peasant Development Committee of Guatemala, was reported on Thursday. The 52-year-old social leader worked in CODECA, a community organisation that has sustained a fight against land dispossession and the privatisation of national property, which has cost the lives of several of its leaders. According to statements, the victim was at her home in the Las Delicias village, accompanied by her daughter-in-law, who warned her that a man was asking for her at the door. Upon leaving her home, the social leader was shot 8 times, as reported by the Guatemala National Police. This Friday, the world commemorates the 93rd anniversary of the birth of Colombian writer Gabriel García Márquez. Due to the impact of his works, García Márquez became one of the paradigms of journalism as the basis for literary creation. 100 Years of Solitude, his most recognised book, won him the 1982 Nobel Prize for Literature. The novel is a family saga with tints of magical realism. The first edition was published in Buenos Aires in June 1967. And we have more stories coming up after this break, including the latest on the situation in Guyana. Welcome back. Scenes of chaos continue in Guyana, where the results from Monday's general elections remain unclear. The police in full riot gear have started to repress opposition People's Progressive Party supporters who have taken to the streets to protest election irregularities. The Guyana Elections Commission began recounting ballots on Friday, but only for Region 5 of the country. International election observers are in agreement that the results released and presented on Thursday for Region 4, the most significant in the country, could not be verified in violation of the established vote tabulation process. The opposition has described the situation as a plot to steal the elections. Reports are that the increase in international pressure could force the Elections Commission to resume statement of polls counting for Region 4. And this March 6, Guyana's ruling Partnership for National Unity and Alliance for Change coalition issued a press release denouncing alleged improper conduct by the opposition People's Progressive Party. The text condemns the PPP's alleged attempt to hijack the 2020 national and regional elections and claims the party disseminated fake news and propaganda to mislead the public opinion and create tension and disunity amongst the people of Guyana. In the statement, the coalition goes as far as to mention alleged PPP contacts with Russian agents in Guyana. Finally, the coalition urged its supporters to remain calm, vigilant and united as the party consolidates its victory and forms the next government of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. All this despite the continued uncertainty over the results and the chaotic events at the Elections Commission. Just days before International Women's Day, a UN study has revealed that nearly 90% of the world's population is biased against women. Despite the progress that has occurred in closing the equality gap, researchers found that people's beliefs still negatively impact women's rights and equality. Some of the prevailing views include that men are better politicians and business leaders than women, that going to university is more important for men than women, and that men should get preferential treatment in competitive job markets. The percentage of those holding at least one sexist view was largest in Pakistan, followed by Qatar and Nigeria, while Andorra, Sweden and the Netherlands show the lowest records of sexist beliefs. One of the report's most concerning findings was that 28% of people believe it's okay for a man to beat his wife.
I think that the Me Too movement that has been around for some time now has the potential to help boost women's political representation, given the fact that one of the inhibiting factors for women's political participation is sexism, sexual harassment, gender-based violence, and the Me Too movement has brought these issues to the fore. It is important then that we seize this potential, this momentum, to continue to work, to push back on pushback, that is, to increase the pace of women's political representation. Otherwise, it will take us more than a century, if I'm not mistaken, to achieve gender equality.
Colombia, Costa Rica and Peru join the list of Latin American countries that have reported coronavirus cases on Friday. The Colombian National Institute of Health reported that the first case in the country is a 19-year-old woman who arrived in Bogotá from Milan, Italy. Meanwhile, the Costa Rican government announced that the first patient to test positive in the country was a 49-year-old American woman who had arrived as a tourist. This morning, the president of Peru, Martín Vizcarra, also announced the country's first case of COVID-19. In a press conference, the head of state informed that the patient is a 25-year-old man who recently travelled to Spain, France and the Czech Republic. The head of the World Health Organization said on Friday that the world was on the verge of reaching 100,000 confirmed coronavirus cases and urged all countries to make containment their highest priority. The global death toll has now surpassed 3,200, while 83 countries have reported cases. Meanwhile, the Vatican confirmed its first case of the novel coronavirus on Friday and closed some of its offices as a precaution, while Pope Francis continues to recover from a cold. Hungary has confirmed 4 cases of COVID-19 so far, while Togo, Australia, Cameroon and Serbia reported their first COVID-19 cases on Friday. And from Palestine to France and Iran, the coronavirus continues to spread across the world. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas declared a 30-day state of emergency on Thursday after coronavirus cases were reported in the West Bank city of Bethlehem. The decision was announced by the Palestinian Prime Minister hours after officials closed Bethlehem's Church of the Nativity and banned foreign tourists from West Bank hotels. Meanwhile, in France, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe announced the closure of nurseries and schools for 15 days in the 2 departments most affected by the coronavirus. In Italy, the total number of infected patients is now 4,636, while there have been 197 deaths. Iranian authorities confirmed the virus has killed 124 people, while there were 4,747 confirmed cases. Officials have acknowledged the virus is now present in all of Iran's 31 provinces. Iran and Italy have the world's highest COVID-19 death tolls outside of China. And FIFA and the Asian Football Confederation have announced they're postponing the second round of the 2022 World Cup and 2023 Asian Cup joint qualifiers campaign due to the worldwide impact of the COVID-19 outbreak. According to a FIFA statement released on Thursday, for both football associations, the well-being and health of all individuals involved in football matches remains the highest priority. The Women's Olympic playoff between China and South Korea, both hard hit by the virus, is also up for discussion, as well as the AFC Futsal Championship in Turkmenistan. And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more on the situation in Syria. Don't go away. Welcome back. Speaking to a Russian news channel, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad made reference to the military situation in Idlib.
Militarily, the priority now is Idlib. This is why we see Erdogan using all his force and no doubt under American directives. This is because by liberating Idlib, we will be able to move towards liberating the eastern regions. As I've said on several occasions, for them, Idlib militarily is an advanced post. They have used all their power to obstruct the liberation of Idlib so that we do not move eastward. However, despite not yet advancing towards the eastern region, we are still in direct communication with the population there. There's a great deal of anger and resentment on their part against the American occupation and against the groups acting on behalf of the Americans.
Brief clashes erupted on the Turkish-Greek border on Friday as migrants attempted to push through into Greece. Greek police fired tear gas at those trying to break through a border fence. Calm was quickly restored with hundreds of migrants sitting and chanting peace, freedom and calling for authorities to open the gates. Makeshift camps for thousands of asylum seekers have sprung up around the border since Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced last week that they would no longer be stopped from trying to leave the country. Meanwhile, the Greek authorities continue to claim that the situation represents a serious threat to the country's national security. And a number of migrants from Turkey have arrived to the Greek island of Lesbos. The humanitarian crisis unfolding there has been met with indifference from the European Union. The new surge in the number of migrants who have arrived to Lesbos by boat from Turkey has spiked already high tensions on an island that has been on the front lines of the migration crisis for years. More than 1,700 migrants have landed in Lesbos and another 4 Greek islands over the past week, adding to the 38,000 that are already crammed into overstretched migrant camps. Greece has suspended asylum processing procedures in a bid to halt the new arrivals.
You have to come back, and you be forced to come back to Turkey, and people don't like to come back because they don't have any good situation. There isn't anything.
To us, we are in need of better life, better situation just for having freedom. We are just in need of peace. And the situation here is awful. It's really awful. We are in need of water, food, oxygen, really.
A spokesman for the Interior Ministry of Afghanistan confirmed that at least 27 people were killed and 29 wounded in an attack at a memorial for a minority Shiite leader in the capital Kabul on Friday. Several prominent political leaders escaped the remembrance ceremony unhurt, including Abdullah Abdullah, a top contender in last year's presidential election. The attack was carried out by unknown gunmen who opened fire during the memorial to mark the 25th anniversary of the death of Abdul Ali Masari, the leader of Afghanistan's minority ethnic Hazaris. Authorities confirmed that the security forces had cleared the area but did not manage to capture those responsible for the attack. The Taliban denied any involvement in the attack, which came after a deal signed with the US on Saturday, paving the way for the withdrawal of US troops from the country. The US-based online news publication The Intercept on Thursday revealed the attempts of an anti-Iran pressure group with close ties to the Trump administration to persuade major pharmaceutical companies to end their business with Iran. Despite a massive coronavirus-related public health crisis in Iran, the United Against Nuclear Iran pressure group continues with its campaign targeting medical trade with Iran despite the Trump administration's special financial channels and licenses issued by the Treasury Department for humanitarian goods and medicine to reach the sanctioned country. The legal channels for humanitarian trade to Iran are widely reported to be failing to provide a sufficient flow of medicine and other goods.
Unfortunately, the regime rejected this.
The United States has extended sanctions against Zimbabwe by 1 year, saying that the new government's policies continue to pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to US foreign policy. US President Donald Trump wrote to Congress saying the restrictions will not be removed until Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa administration implements political reforms. He accused the government of persecuting its critics and economic mismanagement over the past year. A group of 16 African countries called on the US and EU to immediately lift the sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe and give the country an opportunity to recover from its economic crisis. The Zimbabwean government recalled its commitment to the development of the country and the socio-economic welfare of its people.
There's no gun that is able to stop you.
The Reteti Elephant Sanctuary in Samburu, northern Kenya, is among the few sanctuaries that employ women as elephant caregivers. The sanctuary is Africa's first community-owned and run elephant sanctuary and rescues and rehabilitates orphaned and abandoned elephant calves in order for their return to the wild. The sanctuary currently has 16 elephants under its care, which will be released into the wild once they are 3 years old. The young animals are treated and cared for by the dedicated keeper team, recruited from the local community. A mobile elephant rescue unit with specially trained staff returns lost calves directly to their families wherever it can, and also works with surrounding communities to raise awareness and mitigate conflicts between humans and wildlife.
Retreat is the first sanctuary being owned and run in East Africa by the community, and Retreat also is the first sanctuary employ women as elephant keepers, and our community empower women, and that's why we are working with these baby elephants.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.